All right, now that we are recording, welcome everyone. This is our second digital portfolio management launch and learn. Today we'll be focusing on KPI groups. Caitlin's going to do a little walkthrough, but as always, we do encourage you to give us feedback during the session, ask questions if you have questions, and from here, I'll just let Caitlin take it away.
Awesome, thanks. Hi, everybody. Justin and Chris, if you could also help funnel questions my way, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. It's just hard to present and do that at the same time. So
for sure.
And then if anybody wants to ask a question over like the mic or anything, just raise your hand and we can do that as well. We do want it to be interactive as much as possible. So as Chris said, we're going to focus on KPI groups for this topic. We'll spend the first part of this session where I'll kind of give a little context of where it came from. I'll do a demo. Again, welcome questions or input or feedback as we're going through that. And then we'll open up to more of a general dialogue and questions. Doesn't have to be related to KPI groups, can be anything. We can dive into that as well. So that's how we'll use the session today. And with further ado, I'll get started. So what we'll do, talking about KPI groups, is I'll give you a little bit of background and context. We touched on it in our last session, but we'll go into a little bit more detail. We'll talk about the feedback that we received related to, what customers were looking for when it comes to tracking key metrics for their services and offerings in the context of portfolios. And then we'll discuss the benefits of KPI groups, why we selected that as a solution, and why they're adding a ton of value. They can be used in a lot of really good ways. And I'll touch on a couple of keynotes before we then get into the demo. And if you guys wouldn't mind just going on mute if you're not going to be talking, so that way we're not picking up any background, that'd be great. Okay, so a little bit of background and context. Leading into creating digital portfolio management, we had a product called Service Owner Workspace. Many of you or some of you may be familiar with it. It was kind of our original solution for service owners, a place and a way for a service owner to manage and view key operational metrics around their services and offerings in the context of a portfolio. And there was this concept of a performance score. When we originally did the research for this product, a lot of the feedback was, hey, we would like a red, yellow, green indicator to tell me what service or offering or part of the portfolio I need to pay attention to, so I can kind of quickly get a sense of where and what needs my attention. There's a lot of things going on. I'm very busy. Point me in the right direction. And so that's really where the performance score originally came from. And we provided a couple of key metrics that contributed to that score in our, kind of our first release, early release, again, based on feedback. So things like customer satisfaction, service stability. So what kind of incidents are we seeing? SLA breaches, availability and outages, things like that. And in theory, and I think in practice, it made a lot of sense, and it was based on the feedback that we got. But the challenge, what we really saw was, in reality, and based on customer feedback, the performance score was really hard to interpret. So because we were looking at metrics that were on like different scales, could be an incident count where more incidents is bad. It could be a percentage with availability, or it could be a customer satisfaction metric, which is like out of a 5-point scale, and that a higher number is better. So having to like do all of the calculation and aggregation of that data, getting it all kind of on the same playing field to provide a single score of red, amber, green. When we actually had it in the hands of users, they would look at it and they would say, I don't know what is driving this score down or up. I don't know why it's red, so it's hard for me to do anything about it. And in actually digging into more of the details and understanding what they wanted instead, now that they could actually see the product and see the tool, the feedback was, we really like kind of these core metrics that you're seeing, more that raw data at the offering level. But when it gets aggregated higher and higher and higher, it becomes more and more generalized, and again, not that useful in practice. And so it was like, hey, we want to see availability at not only the service offering level, but we want to see it on the service level, on the taxonomy node level, at the portfolio level, so we can really report on those metrics and know whether or not we're hitting, targets that we have at each of those levels. And then the other aspect was it worked in the scheme of a service portfolio. So you had to weight the taxonomy notes at each level. You had to weight your services, you had to weight your offerings, and then you had to weight the metrics themselves. And everything had to be weighted in order to actually see that score and use that metric in the service owner workspace. So the setup was complicated. Actually then moving taxonomy nodes or moving services and offerings and changing your metrics, it was incredibly taxing. And so it really kept most customers from going through that process, or it just took an incredibly long time and couldn't really get value out of the metric and the service owner workspace. So adoption was incredibly low. It was very hard to get into the experience. The other part was the performance score was really rigid. So it was the same metric tracked at every offering, every service, every node. You could sort of get away with certain things by weighting metrics at 0, but it wasn't a great solution. It was just too rigid. And so the feedback was, we need to be able to track different metrics in different parts of our portfolio, because technical services are going to be treated differently than business services. I'm not going to do a CSAT score on my technical service. I would like to see a CSAT though on my business service. And so we had to account for that. So all of this feedback led us to reevaluating how we want to support that tracking and measuring of services and offerings in the context of DPM and in the context of a portfolio. The KPI group feature was something that was being leveraged in workforce optimization, which is another product that's kind of in my pillar where DPM sits. And in reviewing that feature, it was something that was there. It was getting really good positive feedback from customers who were interested in WFO. It met a lot of the needs that we were hearing from our customers. So it's configurable. You can choose whatever metrics you want to track in the KPI groups, and you can set the order. You can choose what kind of a visualization you want to use. You can tailor what the labels will be, things like that. So a lot more flexible than what we were being able to provide with our performance score. And then it allowed us to report on those key metrics at each level of, from the offering to the service, to the taxonomy node, to the portfolio. But you didn't have to use it in the context of a portfolio. You could just use it on a service and an offering. So it makes it much easier then to get up and running with managing and tracking your services in DPM without having to use that portfolio structure and have that fully defined. It could be something that you work into over time, but it doesn't have to happen right away to get value out of DPM. And then you can be a lot more flexible too with what you track in different parts of a portfolio or from a service to even an offering. So you can add more than one KPI group to, a different node, and you can really tailor what metrics you want to track holistically for everything. And then in particular niches of your portfolio or on even particular offerings. So a lot more flexibility there. And then we also were able to clean up the UI. So instead of having a dashboard where you might have 50 different KPIs on the same page, we have this relationship of a parent and supporting KPI. So it's a much cleaner visual for the user. You can hit them with those key high-level metrics when they first come to the Run tab. And then they can actually drill into individual KPIs, and you can have supporting indicators to give them more context to what they're seeing. And provide those additional metrics if they need them. And I'm going to show you all of this, but I just wanted to hit on these key benefits first. And then the other thing is, I'll show you how you can map KPI groups, but we have an inheritance model, meaning if you add a KPI group to a portfolio, everything in the portfolio will inherit that KPI. So it also makes it quicker and easier to map specific KPIs and not have to add it to every single entity in and of itself. Are there any questions about any of this before we continue on? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question, Kaylin.
Yeah.
The metrics that were tedious that had to be put at the business service, the service offering level, when you move to the standard portfolio, and let's say you filled out all those metrics, and now you're using the KPI groups, do those metrics have to be manually removed, or they just get ignored, or what happens with those?
I think, and Justin, you might be able to speak better to this, but I think, Lou, you have a case for this. Is that right?
No, yes, I might have a case, but the issue that I reported last time, I'm not seeing, after I moved this into production, I'm not seeing the same behavior where the metrics are not populating. The ask is if somebody has gone through and filled out, like you were explaining, the tedium of the weighted metrics, and then you move to the KPI groups, do you have to go in to those weighted metrics and remove all of those, or just leave them there abandoned? What happens with those?
We don't recognize any of the performance metrics that were set up in Service Owner Workspace in DPM. So you don't have to remove them. You don't have to do anything with it. It's not going to show up in the DPM UI. You will need to map a KPI group. What we did, though, as a starting point is we provide basically a lot of those similar KPIs, and actually more than what we provided in the performance metrics, as out-of-box KPI groups with indicators. So you can look at those and see if you like those options to map to your existing structure. But there's no work that you have to do to remove them or undo any work that you did. And when you mentioned the standard portfolio, so one thing I want to call out is in service portfolio management, when you create a portfolio, we had a concept of layers, which means you had to define the number of layers a portfolio will have. And then you can assign nodes to a layer, and then you can relate nodes to each other to build the structure. And then at the very bottom of the portfolio, you add your services. So we introduced a new portfolio structure. We're calling it the standard portfolio, and it's available in Utah. And what it does is it removes the concept of layer. So it allows you to create different levels of depth within the same portfolio. And it's much more flexible. So it's easier to edit and update the portfolio. And then with also removing the weighting and the performance score, again, even easier to make changes. Whereas before you couldn't just move something because you had to reweight everything. It would screw up your weighting. So that's when you reference the standard, I just wanted to call that out, that if you're not familiar, that is something that has been introduced. And I think there is a defect related to the nodes and the breakdowns. And so that is something that we're working on already. So if you're seeing that, please do let us know, or let us know if you have a case open for that.
Okay, thank you. That was a great explanation. Exactly what I was asking. Thanks again.
Awesome. Yeah, sure thing.
So if you don't want to expand this for all the calls, all the requests, what you might need to do here is create another transaction folder and specify the URL for the service builder.
Sorry, I didn't get your last part. That's what you're suggesting. So what is that? What is that?
I wasn't sure if Vinod was talking to us or not on that one.
Okay, it sounds maybe not, but okay. But if there's a follow-up there, we can definitely take that. So, okay, moving on to some keynotes. So KPI groups can be found if you go to all and then digital portfolio management. There are two main tables here, KPI groups and KPI group mappings. I'm going to demo all of this, but just kind of some notes so you can go back and reference this, this deck. We'll share it out. We ship 12 KPI groups, and so you can see them here. And there's different types. I'll talk through the types and the implications of what a type means. But you can see that we have a type for the service portfolio level, services, offerings, and then we also have application services. In our next release, what we're doing is we're going to be creating KPI groups for business applications. So that will be coming as well. You can create your own KPI groups. You could, of course, edit the KPI groups we provide. The only little caveat I will say is sometimes we do make updates to them based on feedback so that they're more usable, you know, as is versus having to change them. So just kind of being aware of that. If you do make a change, there could be some conflicts, you know, when we ship an update. So the recommendation is that if you do want to make a change, to basically like replicate the KPI group that we ship with the changes that you want to make. That way, anytime we do make updates, you'll just get those kind of automatically. You can also map KPI groups. The DPM admin role can create, edit, and map those groups. The DPM manager can view them. And then if the user is also given a service editor role, they are able to map KPI groups to their services and offerings generally, but we do support that in Service Builder. So they'll be able to look at KPI groups that have been created for offerings and services and map those accordingly. So that is just a couple of keynotes to be mindful of. And now we'll jump into the demo. Give me 1 second. I'm going to stop this share. Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yep.
Awesome. So like I mentioned, first, as we'll just kind of go into the actual tables, and then we'll look at what the UI looks like and how it actually works. So when we click on KPI groups, this was that screenshot that I was showing. There are 3 key columns here that you'll notice. It's the name of the KPI group, the type of KPI group, and then the order. So at this level, what I'll call out is we do create KPI groups per type, and the type determines what you can map that KPI group to. And really the main aspect of it is ensuring that the indicators within that group have the correct breakdowns. So that's kind of why the type is important. And then the order, this is a global order, so it dictates how KPI groups are ordered on a page when multiple KPI groups are mapped to an entity or they're being inherited. So we have like a sort of a level of, first we show inherited based on order, and then we show mapped directly based on order. So that's how you can use this order field for preferences. So clicking into a KPI group, here you'll see that you can add a name. This is the label that will be shown in the DPM UI. You can add a description. We don't actually show the description at the moment. One of the things that we have in our backlog there, I should also mention, there is a specific product manager for KPI groups. So we work very closely with him and his team to share feedback and input and suggestions. And so some feedback we've gotten is like tool tips. So the description might be used to help with adding extra explanation of what a KPI group does. But this can also just be helpful to let the user know the intention of why this group was created. And then within the KPI group, you'll notice that there are KPIs and we have mappings. It's mappings table. So the mappings tell you where this KPI group has been mapped. If you, again, based on type, it can only be mapped to a service portfolio since this is the type, and this can't be edited. So once you do choose the type and you save it, that's kind of set in stone. And then looking at the KPIs themselves, we have the label, which this is what will show up in the DPM UI. And then we have what the KPI or the indicator name is, and that's linked here. So we can go look at that. And then I mentioned this concept of parent and supporting KPIs. These are all parents. And you'll notice there's this filter here. So we're showing the parents in the KPI group. If I kind of walk it back, you'll see all the KPIs in this group. And so these are added as supporting KPIs to a parent. And I'll show you the value of doing that, but just something to keep in mind. And then we also have this concept of display aggregate. So at the moment, KPIs are shown, we have time ranges in the UI, a start and end date. So you can select what time period you want to look at, which is nice. So you can see data over time. However, in order to give like a single score number, you have to choose whether you want to show the sum of that period of time or the average. Now, a lot of the feedback that we've been getting is sometimes that doesn't actually make sense. You just want to see what the latest score is along with the trend. So you know, okay, how is this doing compared to last week or last 30 days? And so that is a feature that's being worked on, and we're hoping to introduce soon. So we'll have a third option of latest score. And so I think that'll be a really nice addition. If I click into a parent, so that since this is empty, it means it's a parent KPI. You'll also be able to see the supporting, so the like more refined, version of this part of the KPI group. You'll notice this is again that name or the display value DPM. This is the indicator itself. I'm sorry, this is the label. This is what KPI group it belongs to. This is the KPI or the indicator in PA, performance analytics. This is where you choose the aggregate, and then this is the order within this particular group. So in this performance snapshot, we have 3 single scores, and you'll notice that availability is first because it's 100. So that's how the order can be used. And then similar with order within a supporting indicator tab, this determines the order from left to right in the KPI details page, which will show you that UI. If we go and actually look at an indicator, one of the main things to keep in mind is the indicator has to have the appropriate, sorry, this is kind of slow. It has to have the right breakdowns. So because this is a service portfolio KPI group, it needs to have a breakdown by portfolio, taxonomy node, service, and offering. That way you can see metrics at each level of that portfolio and have the KPIs work basically. And so when we ship these KPI groups, you'll get our indicators, and you'll also get the breakdowns, and you'll see like the structure of the KPI group. So you can use that as a reference, and then of course, like reuse these breakdowns that we ship, but you'll see them here. And we've pre-appended DPM. So it should be easy to find.
So the relationship here, does it, like you talk about services, availabilities, outages, that's straightforward. But when it comes to MTTR and the dependency on how the service is represented in the incident, is there anywhere, or is there documentation linked in here as far as, oh, it's pulling from the impacted services of an incident in that extended table, or is it directly from a service that's located as a primary CI, for example?
That's a really good question. So it's both, and it's also affected CIs. So what we've done for all of our service related KPIs or indicators, I should say, is we look at whether, and I should also say our data model is organized around the offering level. So we really do best practice, right, is to have your incidents associated, your incidents, outage records, changes, problems, et cetera, have a reference to the offering, and then we roll that up to the service level. So if the offering is listed directly on that record, so for example, the incident record, directly as the service offering, or if it's included in the impacted services or the affected CIs related lists, that's included in our reporting. And that was an update that we made. It's Tokyo compatible, but I think that's what we did in one of our February releases. So if you're not on Tokyo, we only do the direct reference through the offering field. Once you get to Tokyo, it's offering and impacted services and affected CIs.
Okay. So if we make an outage against the business service, which should then replicate down to all the offerings, is that still a good practice, or should we be creating outages directly against the offering and not even take it against the business service?
It should be the offering. Yeah.
Okay.
Follow-up question to that. Yes, I agree. It's the outage is the offering. The incident CI would be the application service. It doesn't have to be for most customers, but I believe that's where you're trending to. And earlier you indicated that you're going to be doing KPI groups for business apps. So does that mean that in APM, where the indicators are on the APM user interface, they now will see that incident? So you can say, how many apps do I'm looking at a particular app for apps rats, and I want to see, if this app has over 500 incidents, and you'll be able to use that KPI group for the business app then, because today, I think it's configured where it wants the business app to be the CI in order for that to register.
I'll have to talk to Doron about that, the product manager there. So in DPM, all of our metrics are based on the application service, and that's driven through the feedback that we got from the common services data model team and how things should be reported and rolled up. So that is how we're aligned. And the metrics were replicated from what the application portfolio management team had in the first place. But we'll see what they're going to be doing moving forward. Because my understanding is, again, from a best practice data model, it shouldn't be directly on the business application.
That's correct. Agree. And you had mentioned earlier about editing the KPI groups. Did you mean to say that the out-of-the-box KPI groups that you ship, the best practice is we can edit those, or you want to make a copy of those? Because if you make a copy and create new ones, obviously, but the ones that are shipped are the ones that are surfaced in BPM itself. So I'd assume we would just edit those. And if we do, well, we get updates to those if you do an update in another release or store release.
Yeah, so that's a good follow-up question. We sometimes do make updates to the KPI groups, and so if you've edited what we ship, there might be conflicts, and I'm not sure. Honestly, we tried to replicate, and we were having a hard time understanding if it would overwrite or if it would add to what you've already done. So to be safe, I should say, if you replicate what we ship and make edits there, any edits that you want, either removing KPIs or adding additional ones, then that would be safe upon like upgrading or uptaking anything new that we or any changes, I should say, that we make to existing KPIs we've already shipped.
Okay, one final thing I thought I heard you say about changes. The change should also have the application service, not necessarily the offering. I thought I heard you say offering.
Yeah, so on the
CI.
configuration item, yes, configuration item it should be the lowest level of infrastructure or software, like any kind of like application service and down, so to speak. We have a direct reference to the offering on those fields. And so when that service offering field is populated with an offering, we will show that in DPM. San Diego versions, that's what we look at. Tokyo versions, we also include the impacted services and affected CIs related lists.
Right. And I believe in Utah, you can now see the offerings, all incidents, all changes, all problems as the related lists, which is basically connecting anything related to those main impacted CIs.
In service portfolio management. Yeah, exactly. Yep. In service portfolio management. That's right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Hey, that's an excellent point as a follow. I don't know, like a best practice, so that we are properly feeding for these KPIs.
Mm-hmm.
Best practice on the lowest denominator for that CI in the tool, because we're having configuration item, then right underneath that we just started putting business service, and that's a wrong move, right? We should have application service at the core of the incident. So I don't know if other people are struggling with that, but that's interesting, because our strategy possibly was moving towards business service. Hey, what are you unable to consume? So anyways, maybe a next kind of some kind of a session or somewhere to point us toward that documentation on best practice on choosing the type of CIs in an incident as it relates to services.
Yeah, so in speaking with Mark Bodman, his recommendation is to use the CI field to help identify where something originated. So if the closest you can get is an application service, that's great. Sometimes too, it'll become, you'll become aware of it as you go, as you do more of that root cause and try to understand, like, where did that actually occur? And then the service offering field should be used to reference a service offering that's impacted. So it could be like, it depends on that app service, or it contains that app service, or however you're kind of using that. But the feedback that Mark was saying is if you are using service mapping and you're creating relationships between all of these CIs, they have features as part of incident management where it'll traverse those relationships and it can actually populate the impacted services for you and kind of build out that web of here are the things that are being impacted by this incident. So that's his recommendation. We will have Mark speaking with us in the session that's following knowledge. So any questions that you guys have on data model and where and how you should be aligning these things and where you should be documenting, which types of CIs, he'll be a really great resource for that.
Yeah, I mean, I work with Mike, and Mike, this is really a really important piece here, because the CI that is being selected, call it from APM or call it from whatever we have in at the bank, it is trying to populate the offerings in the business services. What I'm hearing here is with solid mapping, you could go the other way too, is by knowing which offerings that it was impacted, it should be able to populate the CI that is associated with the application service. I don't know. Because
I know it is. We have to take it offline, Salim, because we're using the business application in the service, and even though we're mapping a dependency to that business application, we're not seeing it loaded down into service mapping into the impacted services. Because that's outside. It sounds like that's outside. It's from application service below. Business application is kind of above that in the common service data model. Got it.
Yeah, it is an offline conversation. Yep.
Just keep in mind that ServiceNow ships out of the box on the incident form, the CI field, the service offering field, and the business application, the business service field. So yes, you are correct. Many people will start out like what you did. We did similar, where we didn't really have the CSDM fully built out. So we didn't even have CIs. We used generic CIs, got rid of those, used offerings. Now we're getting rid of the offerings and swapping them out with the application services. So it all surfaces up to DPM. And Caitlin hasn't shown it, but I believe in DPM, there's business applications. So there's 3 indicators, and those will not populate unless you're using the application service.
Yep, that's right. Thanks, Lou. Okay, all very good questions, and keep it coming. So I'm going to pop back to our KPI group. Because one other thing, and I did notice okay, great. Justin just responded in the chat. But this is looking at our latest version that's going to be available. It's our May release. So we've made a couple of adjustments. I'm going to highlight that. This is the May release is available on Tokyo. So it's Tokyo compatible. And then in our next release, we'll be moving to a Utah release. So just kind of keeping that in mind. But one thing I did want to highlight here is in our latest release, we have a different way of determining the visualization of a KPI. So the only KPIs that have the visualization really capability are the parent KPIs, because those are going to be shown on the Run tab. The supporting KPIs are shown on our KPI details page. And there's really no visualization associated with those. So definitely keep that in mind. But we do give you the option to choose your visualization type. By default, we show the single score. So there's a single score with a spark line. So you can kind of see how the metric has evolved over the past 30 days. And by default, our start and end dates on the Run tab and the metrics that you'll see are the last 30 days. Again, those can be updated, the start and end dates, when you're looking at a Run tab. And then also when you're looking at the KPI details tab. These are the different visualization types that we provide. Group by is used if you want to show like 4 incidents. Here are P1s, P2s as separate like lines on your chart, for example. So that's how you can configure the visualization previously. And if you're on, of course, you're on a previous release, there's a third tab, and that lets you choose a KPI, and choose a visualization type. So that's how you can choose what you want your charts to look like in DPM. And then let's see if there's anything, is there any other questions about like the table structure and the types of fields that we provide, and anything related to this part before we go into the UI?
Hi there. I've got a question regarding the KPI groups in general. So my understanding is you'd need to create KPI group mapping against the KPI groups. And my request with the customer at the moment is to, default all those out-of-the-box KPI groups if you want to portfolio, right? So managed to update the KPI groups type from the list view to be all portfolios, for example, so that it prevents me from reworking, and creating all, maybe a new KPI group with all the KPIs that are out of the box. So is there a better way of doing this? Because obviously, in this case, the customer wants, those KPI groups as a default against all the services, the application services, the service offerings, the business services, technical services, and so on. Instead of creating KPI group mappings, or you'd have to go down that route, and I guess the only way is to either update those types to be service portfolio, or create new KPI group that will have all the KPI included in that.
Yep. Yeah. So good question. If you want a set of KPIs to apply to everything in a portfolio, the easiest way to do that is through a service portfolio KPI group. So you can absolutely do that. If you want to track specific metrics in a specific place in your portfolio, you can create a portfolio, a type that is, let me do the create new so you can see all the types. But we also have a taxonomy node type. So that could be used in a branch of your portfolio, and it would apply again to everything within that line. I have shared a feature request with the product manager for this product to have an easier kind of like able to select multiple things at a time to map a KPI group that maybe applies to a subset of offerings, for example, or you could even add it to all offerings. But it would be more of a slush bucket type selector so that you don't have to map individually each time.
Yeah, because initially I was thinking about creating a script that does it, but yeah, no, that's good to know that you've got something coming up on that. No, thanks for that.
Yeah, sure thing. And the other thing I just wanted to call out really quickly is the application service doesn't inherit any KPI groups from the portfolio. And that's because, you could have an application service that's related to a bunch of different offerings within the same, it could be dependent or it could contain, and then it also, can be related to the business application. So that entity doesn't inherit from the services side, just as a.
Oh, no, that's good to know. Thank you for that. Yep.
Okay. And then this is our mapping table. So here you can see all the different mappings that have been created, and you can remove them if you want to. And then you can also create a new mapping. So when you create a new mapping, you select the group that you want first. So I'll just select outage and availability. And then because it's of type offering, it'll show you, you can choose an offering to map it to. And then when you, let's see. Let's just pick one. Okay, and then we'll submit that, and the mapping is created. So that's how you would do the mapping, and then it would show up on that page on the offering run tab. Oh, and the other thing, sorry, I should also mention is if you update the types, make sure that you update the breakdowns. So you want to ensure that the depending on the type of KPI group you've created, that the breakdowns for the indicators are all encompassing of what it pertains to. So for if it's a taxonomy node KPI group, you're going to need taxonomy node, service, and offering. If it's portfolio, you need all of them, you know, coming down the chain. So just as something to keep in mind. Okay, so if we go now into digital portfolio management, you'll have to kind of bear with me a little bit on some of our demo data. It's a little crazy, but in the enterprise portfolio module, is the first place that you really will see the KPI groups and how they're, you know, they're inherited and they're you know, you see those specific metrics at each level. These are the parent KPIs, like I mentioned. And then, you know, at any level, when you drill down, you'll notice that you're seeing the same metrics, and then you'll see the scores for that particular taxonomy node. And then if you go into the view details for the portfolio or a taxonomy node or service or offering, that's when you can kind of get into more of the details. So on this page, which is really nice, is you get that direct breakdown. So you can see where your performance is the best and also where it's the worst in the portfolio, and kind of drill down into that chain, depending on what metric you care about or what you're focused on.
Caitlin, sorry to interrupt. We have a question in the chat. If you could explain the breakdown a little more.
Okay.
From Cassandra E. Kittle. I don't know if you want to come off mute, Cassandra, but no. Okay.
I was sorry.
You're okay.
You said make sure to have your breakdown set up a certain. I just got lost.
Yes. So with the previous question of just updating the type. So if you want to change any of the types, like if you want to change our incidents KPI group that we've created for offerings, you want to make sure that the indicators that are mapped to each of the KPI groups has the appropriate breakdown. So these are the breakdowns. This is an indicator, like a PA indicator record. And here you can see what's the actual calculation and the conditions and the parameters of that metric. Because really the KPI groups are kind of containers for indicators. And then of course we give you the roll-ups and the breakdowns and all that good stuff. We bring it all together, but you want to make sure that this is working well for you as like a base at the base level. Because if you don't have the right breakdowns, or if this is like seeking out, you know, the wrong data, that, you know, you're not going to have the outcome that you're looking for. So if you come down to this tab, you'll notice that we clicked on a service portfolio KPI group and an indicator within that particular type. So it has all 4 breakdowns, which is good. So this is what you want. If you just create a KPI group that's for services, so it's only going to be mapped to the services, and then that the child offerings inherit that, you'll want to have the service breakdown and the service offering breakdown. Does that make sense?
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Oh, and actually one other thing that I should have mentioned, which is a cool feature that we released in our last release. So we do have a KPI called MTTR, mean time to resolve. Let's see. Okay, so or average time to resolve is the actual indicator, but because it's in our KPI details page, which I'll show you in DPM, we have the option to view the source records that make up that indicator. So you can see, okay, here's my score and here are the records that are feeding that score. Well, we couldn't do that with formula indicators, because formula indicators will look at more than one source table. So it's like, well, which do we actually show you? So the nice thing is now you'll be able to select, you know, if you have a formula indicator, we give you the option to choose the indicator source. And so this will be it'll tell you what the source tables are. And so I'm going to choose the number of result incidents. And if I save this, when I then go into the workspace, I can see the result incidents that are contributing to that MTTR metric. So that's a pretty cool enhancement that we recently made. Okay, so if we come back in here.
And Kaylin, just a time check, we have 12 minutes left.
Okay. Are you guys cool if we keep going, or do you want to cover any different topics?
Cool, keep going.
Okay, great. So you'll notice here then we have this breakdown grid. So you can view again where the data is coming from that make up this top line score. And we have this on the portfolio page, the taxonomy pages, and then also on the service run tab. So you'll see the breakdown by offerings. You can click into any one of these, and then you could also drill directly into any of these grids. For example, let's go into, we can actually go into this one so you can see the record view. But when I talk about a KPI detail page, this is what I'm referring to. So here you'll see that score that was on the previous page. You'll have a trend chart, start and end dates. We have that same breakdown grid. But this is specific to this KPI. And then it's going to show you the supporting indicators that you had configured in the KPI group tables. And then you'll also have, remember I selected the incidents table as the source. So you'll see that here as well. That's contributing. And this is for the entire portfolio. You can of course like drill down into, let's see. I think this is the one I want to go down. But you can keep drilling down through the tree and get more and more detail. So let's go to this one. We'll go all the way to a service so you can see what it looks like. And this is what I mean like with our demo data. We need to work on that. Okay, so then once I get to the knowledge base, this is the service. So you'll need to go to the run tab. And then here you'll see not only that performance snapshot that we applied to the portfolio, but you'll also now see this service CSAT KPI group that we mapped directly to this service. And then you'll notice we also have this offering breakdown grid, so you can get into that detail. And then this is the same. So anytime you click on a KPI, a parent KPI group, it'll take you to this page where you can then view the supporting indicators.
Wait, this is not the current. This is the release, not 3.14 that's in the store. This is 3.28 in Tokyo and 3.36 in Utah.
This is a little sneak peek. Yes.
Okay. Right.
So
and would you just,
yeah.
Would you just mind answering the question about when you flashed it on the screen earlier, when you see the not configured yet, going from where you see the not configured yet, how do you determine which KPI is not configured? So you can drill like from where you see not configured yet into that KPI group from a navigation perspective.
You mean
like your mean time to resolve? I saw some scores there. Yeah, right there, not configured yet.
Yes.
So how do you go to where that needs to be configured? How do you know from this screen where to head into the KPI group that would be populating that? Is that just the mean time to repair KPI?
That's a great question. So you would go to we are currently in the service portfolio. I'm sorry, the performance metrics or the performance snapshot KPI group. And this is the parent and these are the supporting. So you would look at the supporting indicators within this KPI group.
Okay.
Caitlin, Mike is on, and I don't know if we want to go deep there, but Mike can probably run us through actually going through the screens and stuff. That might be a little bit too low level, but.
Yeah, I think it might be low level. She's right though. If you go to the KPI group, that's how I like to find this stuff. You go to the KPI group, you drill into the KPI, in her example, you drill into the supporting KPIs of that KPI. The other thing from the KPIs, you can go into the PA indicators. So if you just start from the KPI group, it drills you into every piece that we're showing until you can find what's missing. And one nice thing about going from the KPI group to the KPI to the indicator is that you can then go look at the analytics hub of the indicator, which will show the same basic information that we're showing, because as Caitlin said earlier, we're just kind of wrapping the PA indicator type data. So it allows you to make sure that if it's working in Analytics Hub, then it would be working for us. If there's data in Analytics Hub, you can go look at the scores, you can go look at all of that stuff. If it's good there, it would be good for us. So if it's not configured for us, then it's not configured in the PA indicator world.
And Lou, just to add on, because we get this question a lot in case tasks, they'll see like not configured, no data. I think the two biggest causes of this are either the PAR data collection job isn't running. And so there's a nightly job that runs and there's a bunch of different jobs for different indicators, or there's no data. And so even if the indicator is running, but there's no P3 incidents or whatever, it won't calculate a score. And MTTR is an interesting one because it's a formula indicator. So it's a little bit more complex than some of the other ones. But usually it's either no data or no PAR job. Not always. Sometimes there's a misconfiguration or something, but it is something that a lot of customers run into.
Yeah. I get it. And for the not configured, yeah, it's not configured as what was just described, although the MTTR is tucked under the performance snapshot out of the box KPI. So it's like that is not the KPI group, that is under something else. So it's not very clear. You have to poke around. But I think there's opportunity where the not configured yet could be there. And then you could also say no data available, making the distinction between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Yeah. Empty states for indicators is definitely something we're paying attention to because it is complex. So good feedback.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if I can, nope, okay. Let me just come back here and we'll go directly down to the service. Okay, yeah, so we were here so we can see, again, not only the inherited performance snapshot KPI group, but we also, again, see any KPI groups that have been mapped directly to this particular service. And then if we go even one level deeper, here we can see the on the service offering, there's the inherited and then the ones that have been mapped directly. So you can have that, again, more and more detail or additional metrics as you go down the tree and targeting different kind of levels of personas. And then you can also see, again, how the charts can change, or you can configure to be all single scores or also having, trend charts with group by. So lots of different ways to approach this.
I have a quick question because I was just about to have a script written, but if we have inheritance like this, we have a performance snapshot that has all those KPIs already embedded into it and inherited down from the portfolio, but then we go ahead and have additionally those same ones that are KPIs directly to a business service or to a service offering. Is there going to be a duplication on DPM as well, or does it recognize you already have that KPI and get rid of it?
We don't recognize an individual KPI. We will recognize a duplicate KPI group. Although I'm not sure if we'll recognize it if it's a different type, because like you would have to take this, you would have to like performance snapshot, you'd have to replicate it perfectly, and then you'd have to make it type service, and then still they would technically be different. So, and there is value in showing the same, or I should say there can be value in showing the same kind of baseline indicator, but represented in different ways. Like if you wanted to say, okay, show me my incident count, but now show me my incident count grouped by priority. So you can, okay, you know what I mean? So we wouldn't deduplicate those things. Yeah.
Like, let me just give a real world. So you have the offering performance, that you have the performance, whatever that's called, snapshot from the portfolio inherited all the way down. Mm-hmm. But then you also have outage and availability group at mm-hmm. the offering level.
Yes.
Right. Are those redundant to each other?
So they are slightly different. So here we have this like additional KPIs. We do have availability, but we show it in this like trend view. And then this is actually supposed to be, somebody was messing around with the configuration, but it's a single score that tells you the total outage minutes. So
okay. So there's value in having both. There is value in having both.
Yeah, there can be. It depends on what you want to track and how you want to track it. Like I've seen like 10 different incident related metrics, like all very similar, but slightly different. They're giving you like a little bit of a nuance. And so you could do it again, nested, or you could have separate, indicators actually, or KPI groups on the same page.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Caitlin, we have 2 minutes, by the way. I don't know if you want to do like a quick close up. I know we're having a really great conversation. I hate to cut it off, but
No. Thanks for the time check. I'll just keep going. That's a problem. But I wanted to say the cool thing about the KPI group is that there's a lot of different ways you can approach it. So I think like if you're just getting started, maybe just get started with a portfolio level KPI group, map it, see how it works, see if that's giving you the kinds of information that you're looking for. And then you can start to introduce more and map more as they, become useful. One customer that I've been chatting with quite a bunch, like they use the portfolio level metrics for more like process type metrics. So all their KPIs, or their indicators, I should say, the actual PA indicator is around closed. So the number of closed incidents, the number of closed, and then they have all their reporting that way. And then when they get lower in the taxonomy, they have metrics that are like, what are the new incidents that are coming in? What are our breaches looking like? It's like a little bit more, not current, but it's like, this is sort of what's new happening versus this is what has happened. And these are what those numbers look like. So there is a lot of different things that you can do with it and a lot of different ways that you could approach it intentionally. I wanted to very quickly to actually fully close. When I share out this deck, we have, if I could find it. Oh, here we go. Okay. I have a resources slide. So I'm sorry, I clicked on these to verify that they work, but these are links to different product documentations. This is an example of like how you can configure like an entire KPI within the group for availability. And then we also have this knowledge article that has this a guide called Run Services. And there's a bunch of troubleshooting that we lay out and go step by step. We like talk about the analytics hub, the different jobs, and how you can go and try to assess what might be going on if something isn't populating. And so it is in that knowledge article as an attachment. So you can also take advantage of that if you want more like detailed deep dive information.
all right, sounds good. Well, thank you, Caitlin. That was amazing. Thank you everyone who attended. Just a reminder, the next call won't be until May 31st due to K23 coming up. It will be Common Service Data Model, and we look forward to seeing you all there. Also look forward to seeing you all at Knowledge who are able to attend. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We will be sharing the deck later this evening, Pacific Standard Time. So be on the lookout for that as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
She's